Good morning, everyone. We're going to put a poll on the screen. This one's a little different than what we've had in the past. We're going to ask you to answer this question in the chat, not in the poll, even though it gives you a couple of choices. Once I put it on the screen, please put your answer in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We just wanted to, as we always do every week, and good morning, hear from you about priority topics. We can repeat something we've already spoke about. We can go more in depth about a topic we're confused about, or something ideally, obviously related to the grant. So the procurement rules or the hardware questions, which we're going to be starting to get into, and we'll talk a little bit more about today. But please, if you can, what other topics would you like to hear about, or more in depth would you like to hear about in these webinars? Thank you, Faye, for getting it started. We'll wait a couple minutes. The question is basically, if you don't see it there, what other topics would you like to hear about on these webinars in the future? Or what topics would you like to hear about again, or more in depth? Again, we try to create these and develop them around the needs of you guys, of everyone who's participating. There's a lot of questions and there's a lot of information. So if we need to repeat a topic or go deeper somewhere, we're ready to do that. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Dove. Before we begin, I'd like to turn it over to the Executive Director of the Community Security Initiative, Mitch Silber.
Good to see everyone here this morning. Obviously, the issue of security is on everyone's mind these days. And, we've talked about these consultants' corners. It's a great way to access the expertise that we have on our team, as well as with our teammates, Dove and Ilya. So as you heard today, we're going to be talking a little bit about research and hardware, and those are some of the upcoming areas to focus on. We're also going to make sure that we wrap these up by 11, just so people are able to figure out how much time to allocate for these meetings going forward. And last but not least, not for the subject for today's call, but just to let you know, we're thinking about training and how to get that out to the community. We're going to be doing two tracks. One is we're going to have a webinar probably next week on active shooter, active threat training, and then we will begin to do in-person visits for staff and leadership on how to handle active threat training in your particular location. So two things to keep an eye on coming forward. But with that, let me turn this back to Dove.
Thank you, Mitch. As everyone is hearing, there's a lot going on, unfortunately, but fortunately, we have the resources and the whole team, the regional security managers are there to assist you. There's a lot of work happening from the training perspective, the spec and design perspective, the vulnerability assistance needed to really keep all these pieces moving. So good morning again, and thank you for joining. Seth, if you can go to the next slide. Those of you who are returning, in short, I'll do the recap real quick. We all know that being there's so much information, we like to make sure we cover some of it, but we don't take up each sessions each time going through what we already covered. So like Mitch said, we'll be concluding at 11 a.m. going forward. We want to make sure you know what's to expect, how to schedule your day. Thank you. There you go. Obviously we're not going to hit the button end at 11 if there's still some questions happening, or if you want to stay on and have that opportunity with us, we plan to be able to be around. But so for scheduling purposes, we were trying some different times, what worked, but if this is every week, let's make sure we got that consistent hour. As said so eloquently by Terry last week, DHSCS is your mom. Do not be afraid to ask them your questions. They want you to succeed. The state wants you to be able to implement your grant correctly and have no issues. There's a lot of rules. That's why they exist. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of assistance needed. That's why we exist. So, but just make sure if you have that question, and even when we're assisting you, feel free. We will not be offended if you do go back and confirm with DHSCS. But sometimes there's stuff that they just won't answer because it's that hard gray area, and hopefully we can help you navigate. In the coming weeks, we plan to go further into the hardware spot. I saw some of the responses in the chat so far were about some specific hardware items. That is definitely our plan in the coming weeks. We are not going to ignore procurement and grant rules. That's obviously a very important piece. Besides the fact, as you move further on, there's additional requirements such as the reimbursement forms and other documentation you need to submit. We'll talk about on the way out of the session today about what are the tentative schedule will be in the coming weeks. We're still, collecting different speakers and different expertise. So you can hear right from those type of organizations as well as our team. Make note of that. And if you have colleagues and other organizations that want to hear more about hardware and specific systems, please feel free to share this information. The RSMs from our team will also be reaching out to their communities. As always, and it's still in caps, keep your notes, documents, and records. It's just a critical piece. Make sure to save everything you got, whether it's screenshots, whether it's recordings of your phone calls, well, not actual, notation of your phone calls. Just keep those records, your meetings. It's very important to show the effort, to show that you're moving forward. While many of us are in that either contracts, waiting for the contract to be executed or for our EHP to be approved, or maybe you even put your advertisement out and you're waiting for the bids to come back. Now is the time to work on our RFP and bid package, which we've been talking about the last few weeks. For a refresher, we record all the webinars, so please feel free to watch those again, obviously, and also reach out to your RSMs to provide, whether it's assistance, guidance, linking you to myself or Ilya, providing some of the documents we've referenced. We want to be able to really assist you move forward. Real quickly, because we spent a lot of time, but we just don't like to ignore it in case there is anyone new to the call. The procurement priorities, right? If you have a project of any one of your specific projects, so obviously your grant can be 50 grand or 100 grand, but if a specific category is above 10 grand, which is most projects, you need to advertise in a paper, in a local newspaper. You can supplement it in other places, but you need to get that geographically diverse newspaper. If you have a hate crimes grant, 30% needs to go towards an MWBE. This is a requirement before you move on with the rest of your spending. There's obviously lots of questions here. We've talked about it a little bit. We can talk about it further as you start getting your bids back, and you should be using the portal. There's an online system that the state provides to find MWBE vendors. If you're really struggling, reach out to your RSMs. Always get 3 bids in bold. It's hard. We know. Even we're talking with a location that uses the OGS system, and they struggled even to get 3 OGS bidders to respond. You got to get those 3 bids, whether you're going through OGS, whether you're going through advertisement. Again, we can help you. The RSMs can help you. The bid should be evaluated by committee before you advertise. According to the rules, if you look at the DHSES slides, you should develop your predetermined scoring criteria. We've showed the matrix over the couple of weeks. Reach out to your RSM if you'd like to see our example. Obviously, modify it for your needs. There's no specific way you're supposed to do it, but you are supposed to have it predetermined before you send it out to bid. And then, and very importantly, don't contact the vendors until you have that advertisement, unless you're going through the OGS method, which oftentimes is not simpler, although it sometimes seems it may be. I personally would advise go through the advertisement method, and then we can help you find some vendors. We'll keep monitoring the chat. Please keep it to questions and such. And if there are questions that aren't answered, or sometimes people share their opinions and their experience, that's amazing. That's what this is all about. But make sure that we get to discuss it at the Q&A at the end, so you can hear the nuances, the back and forth, the things you must consider when you have your question. With that, not the next slide, but I will turn it over to our guest speaker for this week. That's an important piece we're doing. Everyone wants to hear from like-minded organizations. Or this week we have our Brooklyn Regional Security Manager, Adam Barish, to speak about, my brother from another mother, to speak about some of the stuff he sees in the field, and then we'll turn it back to today's regular session.
Thank you, Dove. Good morning, everyone. Doing a lot of assessments in Brooklyn, and seeing different things, but one thing that really stands out are the primary entrances, the front doors. When I get to institution to do the assessment, a lot of these doors are unlocked or even open. And in Brooklyn, we've had incidents of recently of individuals walking into the open doors, even during Shabbos, and they'll start rummaging through people's coats. They'll take money. People have even taken car keys out of coats where people park during Shabbos, and they've taken cars. I want to talk about an incident that we had last week in a yeshiva in Brooklyn. Someone walked in with a gasoline container and poured it into a toilet and walked out of the yeshiva. It ended up being a very innocent thing. It wasn't anything nefarious. But we obtained video with the help of the local precinct, and you can see that somebody from the school is holding the door open for the children, and he actually lets the person walk in with a gasoline container. So that's very problematic. The person wasn't challenged, and luckily, very fortunately, nothing happened. There was no incident, no injuries. Another thing that I'm seeing are the cipher punch code locks, the keypads. Some people actually post the combination written in Hebrew that'll allow anybody who speaks Hebrew to be able to get into the facility. And this is also very problematic. I'm going to be very brief, but now when I do see the doors, a lot of these doors are weak. They're not forced entry resistant. Some of them have wood or metal that's very worn, even rusted. And it would take somebody a lot, much fewer than 10 minutes to be able to enter the facility with that. I'm even seeing some hinges that are on the outside that are not secure. So that's pretty easy to get into. You could pry those right off. Now, I am seeing some forced entry resistant doors in facilities, and a very big issue with that is that a lot of them don't have a camera positioned to see the individual that's trying to get in. So this is all important, and this is all part of access control too. I mean, you want to be able to see somebody at the front of your facility and even be able to buzz them in. I mean, I'm not going to talk about man traps now. I'll leave that for our experts to talk about when we do equipment, but this is all part of it. It's just what I'm seeing is it's just much too easy for people to enter facilities. It's fine to challenge people. A lot of times I'll even get to a facility and just see if anybody challenges me. I'm walking in, I might have a jacket on and slacks and a dress coat, but I should still be challenged. I don't start with my identification. I want to see if somebody asks me what I'm here for, even asks for identification, because that's very important. Don't just let somebody in, even if they look the part. I mean, you really need to start with the basic, your front door for the facility. That's your first line. All right, like I said, just wanted to be brief and talk about what I'm seeing out there, and that really is what's standing out. I'm going to turn it over to Ilya.
Well,
really appreciate it. Very valid points. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we jump to a couple of my slides, and I'll be also very brief to offer you an opportunity to add your questions, and Terry is monitoring all of them, and we'll go through them in Q&A. On the subject of training and security awareness, there are 2 points that are exceptionally important, but don't get highlighted often enough. And so I mentioned it to Dov after our last webinar where David, I believe Bill were discussing the incident in Texas. And obviously the question of training was on everybody's mind, because the rabbi at the Texas synagogue mentioned how frequently delivered training on similar topics kind of cemented his own ability and understanding and awareness in how to act. But a lot of training, I would tell you probably about 99% of training is delivered incorrectly. So let me explain why. The first issue is human psychology. So here I am delivering a seminar to a group of about 50 people. And they're of different ages, male, female, of course, and they assembled themselves for this crisis management symposium. And I'm one of the presenters. We were talking about school violence, school shootings, and so on. And I'm standing on a stage that's raised, right? So even every time I paced on stage, it created a bit of an echo noise. Like every time my heel touched the floor of that stage, people could hear boom, boom, the thuds of my heels. So I decided to use it to my advantage, to demonstrate how we don't run, hide, and fight. We first freeze. We don't run, hide, and fight. So the first reaction, tested by psychologists and tested by various experiments, is this feeling of freeze, even in highly trained individuals. So as I was presenting, very suddenly, I stamped my foot on that stage, and it created a very loud thud. And guess what happened? Okay, and I'll demonstrate it to you. Everybody went like this. Okay, because it jolted their awareness and attention from something that they expected to something that they did not expect. And so what do you think happens with a person in a bit of a shock? What happens? Can they make decisions? Can they begin to develop their plan? Can they say, oh, you know what? I heard it. I'm going to go and hide myself away. They don't do that. A person in the state of shock is in the state of shock. They can't think, or they cannot think as well as they would have under normal conditions. So I want you to be aware of how you plan and receive your training so that it could enable you to understand that these moments and sometimes minutes of the freeze can negatively affect your decision making. So point number 2, and this was highlighted in the multiple articles and also in the statements from the rabbi in Texas, where he used a very important word. The word is frequency. I've been in this industry for just over 20 years. If somebody comes to me and I test their security program and they say, we train annually, I say, you don't train. Because if you do annual training, the retention of any information goes away or is significantly reduced if you don't repeat it frequently. So even in this webinar today, you can test yourself after you're done. We'll spend an hour, right? You can test yourself. Whatever we talked about, even if you take great notes, okay? 2 hours from now, ask yourself, do you remember everything I said? Or Dov, or Adam, or anyone else? Do you remember everything? I bet you won't. Okay, you'll remember bits and pieces, right? But some of the information will be gone because you'll get to do something else. You'll switch your attention to other tasks, okay? So please remember that when you are thinking about training, okay, whatever that training may be, you need to address 2 things. If it's emergency incident training, you need to understand how will different people of different ages, with different medical conditions, will perceive the shock of the incident. What will happen to some of them, or to what happens to us in that instant when we know that there is an attack, when we hear a loud thud, or there's a gunshot, or there's a yell, there's a scream or something, right? And secondly, please remember that if you don't train frequently, and frequency, obviously would differ. And I suppose the organizations I work with, I always talk about at least quarterly training, at least, okay? If you train on an annual basis, you're not moving forward. And that knowledge will dissipate after a couple of hours, couple of days, couple of weeks, and maybe a couple of months, okay? So there you have it. Now, Seth, if I may, let's move on to a couple of slides I put together on how you should consider product research. And we're having actually an increased number of questions come to us from various facilities. Some of them are in the middle of the projects. We were having a call with one just yesterday, right? Where there's this conflict. And this conflict arises simply because folks just are not as aware as they should be about how to actually familiarize yourselves with different types of products that are out there that can help you get your projects done. Because this one conflict is, well, wait a second, we can't talk to integrators, right? And during a couple of previous webinars, we said, well, don't talk to them, talk to manufacturers, right? But before I move on, and you can kind of read some of the things on the slide right now, right? The first thing that we advise all facilities, all of the organizations in our community to implement is a project manager. And I said it several times before, and I must repeat myself, because we can see direct results, direct positive results when a facility, after they've received a grant, when they start moving with their RFPs and implementation, if they have a project manager, things go much more smoothly, and there are fewer glitches down the road. The next thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is isolation of different scopes. We also covered that topic in previous webinars, but it's important to repeat that without isolating those scopes, and you can see now a list of those individual scopes of work, right? For example, doors, fences and gates, locking, window film, access control, video surveillance, intrusion detection, and so on. The reason why we perceive them as different scopes is because a single integrator, right, won't be able to do everything on that list. For example, guarding. Integrators don't do guarding. Or a door hardware contractor doesn't do window film. They may, but they likely will sub it out. By the same token, a technology integrator like video surveillance, access control, and so on, they probably also, at best, will be able to sub it out if you're asking them to do doors and locking and gates and fences. Okay, it's not within their core expertise. Once you've built your own isolated set of scopes that you want to pursue and therefore potentially find contractors, some of the ways in which you could begin your search for different types of products that are out there. For example, it's not so difficult to find fences and gates, particularly security and anti-climb fences and gates. One of the ways in which we recommend doing so is, once you've isolated your scope, reach out to some facilities that you're friendly with, some of the peers in your community that have completed these projects in the past. They may not have done all of these projects, but they'll be able to advise you, hey, this company did our doors, or they helped us out with door hardware and locking, right? Or they helped us out with video surveillance and access control. Or it was a guarding firm and we really like how they perform. I guess the strength that I noticed, and I've been working with our community since 2005, the strength of the community is in this very strong connection between facilities and between people who work at the facilities. The more connections you have, the more support you may receive in your initial stages of preparing to organize a project, okay? And particularly, that goes toward figuring out what products may have been used, what works better, right? And what people have been impressed with, or maybe somebody's performance, right? Be it a guarding firm or a training firm, consulting firm, whatever that may be. Asking peers about products and services is probably one of the first and most logical, most straightforward ways in which you can begin understanding what's out there, what works better than something else. The next thing that I wanted to share with you is that, and I guess the community should consider itself very lucky that JCRC created this team of regional security managers. Now, anyone in this position is a continual learner. Okay, the more, like to Adam's point, the more Adam goes out to facilities and the more assessments he conducts, the more he understands what are some of the patterns, the trends about some of the vulnerabilities, some of the exposures that he's noticing around Brooklyn. Let's say someone like Seth or Bill or Terry, they will be going to their communities and their boroughs, and they will be picking up on different trends. Together as a team, they build this better knowledge base of different products, different solutions, different service providers who they would see performing very well. And at the very minimum, this team can connect you with another facility that has done a good job. There are still some improvements to be made in the ways projects are implemented, because we still see some concerning, let's say, performance issues or product quality, of course. But the way we're identifying in the team that goes out and does facility assessments, that they're identifying what works is very straightforward, and they have a lot of information about it. So don't forget that you can also reach out to your RSMs and ask them to give you some guidance on that. Now, during the last webinar, I mentioned, and we already had actually a couple of immediate replies to us after the webinar, that it's not a problem to reach out to manufacturers rather than integrators. Manufacturers, they can't arrive at your facility and deliver an installation. That's not in their scope of work. They make things. And then they have a variety of authorized dealers in different regions, particularly in New York in our case. They work with a dealer network who then deliver solutions and products at certain facilities. It's absolutely allowable to speak with manufacturers about what solutions you're looking to implement. And so certainly there is a process of figuring out, once you've isolated your scope, okay, so who makes fences? Like, for example, there's a bunch of different providers that make fences around the country, and many of them make security-related products. Who makes window film? I'm sure JCRC has covered this on multiple occasions in different webinars, and there are at least 4 or 5 companies that make window film. Now, they're national, very likely national companies, but here is the best benefit that you get out of speaking with manufacturers. Actually, there are 2 benefits. One is they're very attentive when you're interested in their product. Okay. 2 is they may be able to advise you about their network of dealers and, or call them vendors, integrators, who are located in your zip code or near your zip code. And they also take note of who's been recently recertified to use their products and be able, and to sell their products, who they, as they know, is one of the top providers, top integrators in the area. And they also keep track recently, particularly in New York area, of what contractors are certified as MWBE. So that is not required in all projects, but it may be required based on some conditions of New York State hate crime grants. Speaking to manufacturers, just to repeat, is permitted. Because they're not bidding on your job. They're there to help advise you on how their product works. And so that brings obvious benefits to you. Each manufacturer has a fairly extensive website that lists all sorts of products and the way they operate. Now, I know that if, let's say, you go to a specific manufacturer's website, and if they're a national manufacturer, it's going to be quite convoluted to understand what's a good fit for me. Okay. But you don't have to do that. You can simply reach out, find a local contact, that's supervising, let's say, a specific region, in this case, New York region, and speak with them and say, my needs are as follows. And in plain language, explain to them what you're looking for. And then their representative, right, this person, would be able to tell you, okay, you know what? There are a few products that may be a good fit for you. Why don't you take a look at them? I will send you product literature. Product literature is far more specific than when you go on a website and you look through your thousands of fairly unfamiliar products that you don't know how to compare them. One camera may look exactly like another, but their features will be very different. So please don't be scared by the sheer multitude of things you see online, but look for humans who sell those products or who represent the company in a specific geography. In your case, New York metro region. And here's what I did. I did a very simple experiment. I have 3 analysts that work for me, and they know absolutely nothing about security. And I didn't coach them on anything. And I basically said, okay, I need the 3 of you to go and do research on a couple of different product categories or service categories, right? In the case, if it's a guarding firm or if it's training provider, I asked them to break it out into 10 categories, right? And Seth, if you don't mind just jumping to the next slide, okay, I will show you what they came up with. Now, they had no idea what to look for. And here we are. On door hardware, they found, let's say, I'm the the hypothetical recipient of this information, right? They found at least 4 manufacturers that I can tomorrow call and tell them, I'm looking for stuff. Okay, what do you have? Okay, I have these types of doors. And though manufacturers have engineering support in-house so that they can ask you very, specific questions, they can guide you, they can give you direction on maybe, take a couple of photos, send them up to me. Let me see what you have, right? And I mentioned to a facility that reached out to us on the basis of my having said this during the last webinar. I mentioned to them that it's a good idea to sign a non-disclosure agreement with manufacturers before, you kind of engage and before you share with them more information, so that they don't go and disclose the particulars of your project to the integrators that they manage in the region. Okay, that they're connected with, those integrators who are their authorized dealers. And the reason is to simply keep information about your project private, exchanged only for your own benefit so that you can learn more about the product. And again, my team had no idea what to look for. It took each of them, there were 3 people doing the search. It took each of them no more than 2 hours. So this is just an excerpt of a very, extensive spreadsheet that they gave me after having spent 2 hours each of manufacturer websites, of their contact information in New York metro region, broken out into different scopes. You can click either to review what technology or what products are available or what solutions and services are available without having to scratch your head and be worried about, am I disclosing something that I shouldn't? Am I speaking to people that I can't speak to? There is a lot of information about all sorts of technologies. And what they did to me for me was they took these 10 categories that I gave them, and they created this spreadsheet for me, right? Again, 2 hours each. Now, why am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you to let you know that it's not rocket science to become relatively well familiar with services and products that exist in your area without having violated grant rules. I know that for each of your teams, it might be very difficult to, let's say, to begin this type of search because who's responsible? Okay, so people say, I wear 15 hats already. I'm not going to do it. Let's go find somebody else, right? So here's how I know some facilities have circumvented this, okay? One very, very prominent facility in the middle of Manhattan, they asked a young volunteer to come and help them with this type of research. And this volunteer, I can tell you, she called me probably about 15 times. I spoke with her, always pleasant. And I knew that, she needed a lot of information, a lot of support, but she didn't mind asking people for guidance. In some other cases, I know facilities have turned to some people who may have a couple of hours to spare, some volunteers who can sit down and do this. Okay. Now, imagine I've been in the industry a long time. My analyst team could have turned to me and said, well, Lily, can you give us just a hint of direction? So what do you mean by door hardware? Well, okay, I take that. However, I should share with you that you also have a similar team at your disposal. The RSMs for JCRC. You can call each one of your designated RSMs and ask them, hey, where do I start? Like, how do I start building the spreadsheet? And they might be able to give you a couple of guiding points. Now, another thing I know that JCRC is doing, and again, please don't hold me responsible for the exact timing of the release of this information, but I know that behind the scenes, there's a significant effort being made of polling the community itself and trying to find opinions and also some guidance from your peer group about how did they cope with project management and what contractors did they use and what products did they use and what did they like and dislike. Hopefully this information will start becoming available a bit later this year. But for the time being, Dov and I are available. The rest of the JCRC RSM team is available. We worked very closely together. And like I said, just because we did one webinar last week, somebody reached out to us from a fairly large facility and they said, you know what? We just heard something that we were puzzled by. Can you get on the call with us? And guess what? Within 48 hours, we were ready to do the call. Okay. It's not rocket science. These things are readily available, even if you go and you just plug into any search engine, right? Blocking systems. I mean, by now we all have some ability to do, a very trivial online search. And if you are not able to do it, please just call the RSMs or figure out what volunteers work at your facility who are very savvy with different online searches who can go and find this information. Once again, I'm not sugarcoating this in any way. My analysts had no clue what to look for. I'll stop there. I just want to leave you with these thoughts. A lot of people have, over the years, have come to us and said, but Ilya, what are we, right? We're not security professionals. We know nothing. We trust practitioners like yourself. We trust JCRC to come and, help hold our hand a little bit. I understand. But it's just a matter of how projects are managed at your sites, that most of that work will have to be done by an internal team. So what we decided to do is to help enable you with this sort of information, with this guidance, so that you will be less intimidated. Next time, you have to go and figure out what you internally can do without having to spend either more money or rely on a team at JCRC that, yeah, it does have limited bandwidth. So they can't work with every single facility out there in New York metro area to support them all in equal measure. I know that a lot of effort is done, and sometimes we take these evening calls or early morning calls, whatever. We try to be available as much as possible. However, you also have to do some heavy lifting. We understand that, okay? We just figured it's time to start enabling you with some standardized, easy stuff that is not under the veil of some exclusive language, okay? It's all, I started my career in this industry doing this stuff, knowing nothing. Just wanted to share that with you. And now back to Dov. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ilya. And I think you said it perfectly. Like there is so much information out there from the procurement rules to navigating this process to ensure we each do the best, installation and project we can. And, we've even put a lot out there, but the real message is that you can do it. And it can be simple enough. Partner with your RSM. Like Ilya said, they're not gonna be able to draft every step of it for you, create your ad, but if you create the ad from the template, your RSM can review it. You start putting together your list of who you want to talk to, your RSM can review it. If you had a couple nitty-gritty questions, your RSM and us can definitely help you go in the right direction. And obviously, as we always say, DHSCS is there for you. Before we turn it over to Q&A, real briefly, it's been for weeks already, we've had requests for door hardening topics, camera surveillance topics, so that we are turning that page. We wanted to get through the procurement rules and as well as the project management piece because it's so important, right? If we're not following the procurement rules, then yeah, we could do a good install, but you won't get reimbursed. And that's the point of this grant in the webinar. And as well as if you don't have a good project manager and a good process, then we're also swinging and missing. And we really want it to be effective. That being said, this is a kind of our tentative rundown. It can adjust based on, sometimes we're going to look for that additional expert out there and bring them in. And if their schedule's not available, some of these topics might take a few weeks to go through with our 1 hour format, but please take note. We'll post it online. You'll get the emails with the agenda with the topic we're covering that week. So please pay attention and also share with your colleague. The couple dozen of you that are on today, like Ilya said, and your RSMs are running 1,000,000 miles an hour. There's a lot of locations out there. And instead of always starting from zero, guiding everybody, these webinars, whether you watch the recordings or participate, can help us move the needle, stay on the ball, and fill in the gaps to make sure we do it right. I will turn it over to Terry, who will be leading our Q&A. Hopefully we can finish on time, but I'll be available a few minutes after if needed. Please feel free to, when you need to jump off, if it's needed, understood. And with that, thank you, Ilya, and thank you, Terry.
Thanks, great, Dov. Thanks, Ilya. Real quick question. I'll make the first one this question. Ilya, would you be willing to share that spreadsheet?
Willing, of course. But I want to provide as a caveat is, in my view, what I noticed when I ran through the spreadsheet, and I will share it with the central point of contact. I think what I'll do is I'll share it with Seth and Dov, and then you guys decide how to share it with the community because I don't have everybody else's email address. So you will notice two things. One is that under training, my analysts added FEMA. Okay. Now FEMA does training, but they won't do it on a contract. Okay. So just please understand that these are folks that looked at it. They didn't know what to look for. They found one that probably doesn't fit the bill if you were looking to hire a training consultancy. Nonetheless, FEMA is an amazing resource for all sorts of training. Okay. Soup to nuts, basically anything in security. Okay. Really, really a significant resource and free. The next thing that they found when I asked them to look at video surveillance products, right? One of the products, and they didn't have that criteria from me, they identified Dahua as a video surveillance provider. I said, good find. However, banned by US government. Okay. So again, they didn't have that criteria for me, but I'll leave it in. Okay. They did find it. It was, I can share this as an original link, but I will leave kind of with JCRC a decision, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to send out a spreadsheet, let's say it goes out under JCRC and Dahua shows up as a video surveillance provider. We have said repeatedly that that is one brand that is not permitted to be for reimbursement under the current and upcoming grants, right? So again, I'll send the document to Dov and to Seth. For sure, this can be shared with you.
Great.
Before
Yeah.
we jump back to Q&A, we got so excited we forgot our second poll. I see many people are jumping in there. Again, security is a puzzle. It's beyond just the hardware. Obviously, that's the objective of these webinars, but there's more pieces to it. No one thing alone will solve all the security vulnerabilities and our needs. So let's just give that a couple seconds, Terry, and then we'll continue with Q&A. And we put in there or plans to complete these. So definitely put it on your agenda. We'd love to see 100% of all of these in time.
All right, well, everybody's doing that, and hopefully I'm not too distracting in the background. Every speaker today, obviously because it's foremost on our mind right now, is thinking about what happened about 10 days ago in Texas. Everybody talked about the need for security, and some of these things are going to take a while to implement, especially if you have a laundry list of things that you need to do. But what came out on this presentation today is what's one of the most important things to keep your facility safe is your door, your front door, right? And there's a lot you can do to just get your door in better shape. Take a look at it. The main thing is make sure it's locked. You know, one of the things that came out and it's not anybody's fault. It wasn't a right or wrong thing, was that the rabbi down in Texas allowed this man to come into their space. Their door was locked, by the way. So Adam brought out the point that a lot of the places that he goes to visit, and I've had the same experience, the door is not locked, or it's easily defeated because somebody let me in, or there was another door I could go through. So it's really basics. Two other points I want to make real quick before we finish the questions, is not a lot of them, is our partners at the Secure Community Network have a very handy list. And what's it called? A list of low cost, no cost things that you can do right now to improve your security. And one of them is just that, keep your door locked. That's available. We can get it to you. You can look it up on the internet. There's also one other thing that people asked. One person asked today was, how do we handle folks coming into our facility? So that was what happened in Texas. What do you do when you come to the door? Well, CISA has a very good product. It's called The Power of Hello. I posted it in the chat. It's a great product. It's what everybody does, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. When you meet somebody on the street, somebody approaches you on the subway asking for directions, you sort of engage them and you're feeling them out at the same time. We all do it and we don't even know it, and it's part of your security screening. Take a look at that Power of Hello. That's the way you handle people that are coming into your front door. Let me get to the next question.
Terry, while you dig that up, I'll add,
Yep.
There's always that balance that we've always talked about, right? That if you've ever been to David's presentations over the last few decades, David Pollock's presentations, right? That balance of warm and welcoming and safe and secure. We understand, we pray at these institutions. We're members of these institutions. We don't want to be a Fort Knox, but we have to be mindful to our constituents, our guests, our employees. So it's not necessarily that it's so easy and plug and play. We have to think about, the different times of days, how we deal with visitors, how we deal with operational hours, non-operational hours. Actually, on the website, there's a template access control policy. Could be a good place to start as you develop the plans for your location.
Somebody's asking about what's our opinion on the backup for security camera systems, whether it's a local NVR or streaming off-site. Will we cover that sometime in the future?
Sure. We will do both. I can give you a couple of ideas now, and we certainly will have a separate webinar that will be, actually a couple of webinars that will be dedicated to security technologies, one of them being video surveillance. So a lot of video surveillance technology today already entails an off-site streaming, off-site backup, and it's typically sold part of the overall video surveillance technology, the package that you receive. You get the NVR, and you can buy extra licenses for your cameras to be able to record into a cloud-based solution set up by your manufacturer and then calibrated by your integrator. The difficulty arises in not so much how the technology works, but how it is designed and how it is set up. So we've seen where if your facility does not have its own set of IT policies and controls, or people who understand information technologies and how to set up a network, how to increase bandwidth, how to maintain good uptime of systems, just procuring that technology is troublesome because you won't know what a good solution looks like once it's installed. You'll just say, it seems to work, right? But it needs to be tested through a couple of scenarios to make sure that you have proper uptime. If you do want to offload your video after, let's say, 3 days over to the cloud, there are manufacturers that have these systems, and more of just general solutions from manufacturers do have these features in place. We just ask you to be cautious. Whenever these technical things come up, you either have to have a person in-house who understands video surveillance from a technological perspective, like from a networking perspective, or just please make a call to your RSM so that we can at least field that for you and tell you where might be a good resource for you to speak to.
Elia, can I just weigh in for a second?
Sure.
The question isn't just storage, but lots of analytics that can be cloud-based. And again, that calls for the involvement of your RSM or Dov and Ilya. There are miraculous things that are happening in the cloud. At this point, the nonprofit security grant program will pay for your licenses for 3 years for cloud-based services. So, that's another great advantage. But when Ilya talks about configuration, the biggest problem is security. And if you have a good integrator, and you ask the right questions, you can get good security, at probably better security than if it was sitting on your network in your building. But if you don't build in that security, if people don't take care of that, you're just vulnerable. One other thing, there are some really, really extensive systems that with very high pressure salespeople, they will figure out that you received a grant and you'll end up getting sales calls from them. They are known as ransomware, hostageware, excuse me. I'm not mentioning the manufacturer online here, but Ilya knows who I'm talking about. And if you stop paying their license, you thought you bought a camera from them. If you stop paying them a monthly fee, they'll turn off your camera and you won't be able to turn it back on. There's a lot of room for consultation here. Please take advantage of us.
Thank you, David. We're now running short on time. We're going to try to keep these as concise as we can. We don't lose interest in them. I don't know who's going to close this out, but I just want to leave you with, please stay safe, be aware, keep your door locked when you're inside.
Thanks, Terry. Listen, I think we could see from the poll, the issues that everyone is most concerned with derive clearly from the experience in Texas the other weekend, meetings with law enforcement, making sure the door is secure, access control training, all things on our agenda over the next few weeks, both through the Consultants Corner and some other different mediums, both in person and Zoom webinars. So please be on the lookout for those. Reach out to the team. We're looking forward to working with you on this and making your institution and the community more secure. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.